Alright, coming back at you again. In Lord's will, you be edified. Now, first and foremost, want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bashim Yahushua, Bashim Kakudash. Second, want to give double honor to our apostles, the GMS that rule of well. And peace, blessings, salutations to the hopefully elect. And we know this truth, this gospel is given to you Israelites, which consists of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Hispanics, Native American, West Indians, and to our people only. This is Shaquaka from GMS, Virginia. And well, the topic's going to be the spiritual armor. And this kind of what inspired me to do this is, just going out and about. And I've just having some conversation with people that I know in the world. And pretty much I was looked at as crazy for not voting. And it's crazy, man. I was pretty much given a whole explanation why I should go vote. And it's mind-boggling that people can sit there and say we vote for the lesser evil. We're trying to get so-called, Trump out the house. If we don't vote, we're going to lose everything. If you don't do this, you're going to do, it's a back and forth. Democrat don't do not a damn thing. The Republican, they don't do not a damn thing. Ever since the first president, we know for sure Esau had slaves. And even to the last day, it's not that far as well. Meaning, you niggas still are slaves. Because one thing for certain, you're not yearning for, what you might call it, your own welfare. You're bargaining and you're crying for fairness and equality and some type of peace. But, due to the Constitution, I thought all this was given to our people already. So what is the outcry about? Bear with me one moment. Man, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Alright, Shlaki. So, I have Ephesians 6, 10 through 18 up. So I'm going to go through it and see how the Spirit takes me. Like we know, woe to them that go into Egypt for help. Woe to them that Shlaki, Scripture talks about never trust an enemy. And I find it very ironic, Jake they're still intermingling in this world. Now, I have this up in ChatGPT, so I'm gonna just go through it and see what comes out of it. So it says, the apostle of Paul describes spiritual warfare using a picture of a Roman soldier's army. Well, I don't know. I don't see the picture. But anyways. So the point is not physical violence. It is about standing firm mentally. And that's what King David, spoke to King Solomon about. Be strong in the Lord and not to turn from the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. It says, morally, spiritually, and emotionally in a world full of deception, temptation, fear, corruption, and pressure. And it's a lot of pressure, man. Like that saying, pressure bursts pipes, and a lot of people's pipes are bursting. We live in a very satanic, evil world, which Esau has made evil look good. You have, what's that scripture? I can't think of it. But it says today they could look like this. Be strong in the Lord. Today this could mean staying grounded when the world constantly pushes fear. You got the Hannah Montana, right? It's a new so-called demic, which is growing up. It's a lot of fear out here being pushed. Every day you can go on TikTok, social media, Facebook, Instagram, X, whatever platforms that's out there. You can go on them. You can see a push of constant fear. You turn on your local news, there's somebody always crashing out. So lust, greed, pride, anger, and confusion. Because what? We're in Babylon the Great. When you go to Revelation 13, going into 10, we understand this system. Even as Revelation 17, the great whore, we understand, we put these two and together. So, America is symbolic as a whore, a great whore, and a what you might call it, with Revelation 13, another, beast with, Salakia, what is it? Let me get it. Let me butcher it. Hold on. So let me see. Verse 11. Salaki, my bad. Verse 11. So it says, and I beheld another beast cometh up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And we understand this system, this empire derived from the Roman Empire that wounded the beast that was wounded, or that yep, let me see. And I saw one of the heads as it were wounded to death, and the deadly wound was healed, and all the world wanted after the beast. So that's the Roman Empire. And when that fell, came a time, and then overall this was the rebirth of that Roman Empire system. So it says, and he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, the Roman Empire, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. There you go. So, we understand after when America started really getting their power, they were able to subdue nations, drop atomic bombs, as it says, the verse 13, etc. So you got to understand, this system speaks as if it's, bringing forth one attribute of righteousness, this evil, another evil, this, what in democracy will come in with this intentions. Republicans, they're coming to overthrow the democracy intentions. It's just a mess, a bunch of confusion. All of them before they get in the so-called White House, they're full of words, and then after they get in the so-called White House, they lose their words. They can barely talk. They all of a sudden they turn retarded. They turn stupid. They forget about what they said. And it's all a game. It's all an antic, and our people are still, blinded and gone off the system, man. So it says. So again, going back to the chat, be strong in the Lord today. This can mean staying grounded when the world constantly pushes fear, lust, greed, pride, anger, and confusion. Ultimately, one of my favorite scriptures, Romans, the first chapter. You can start at the verse 25th verse on down, and it talks about the consequences of serving this empire, this system, the so-called white man, Edomites. Started with Amalek. So it says, not letting social media, entertainment, politics, trends, or toxic people shape your identity more than the Most High power Yahweh Hashem Yahushua does. Depending on spiritual discipline instead of only emotions. This is why, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding shall be our stability. The light that comes from Yahushua. This is what rules us. This is what we try to follow to the best of our ability amongst this chaotic, confused, toxic, greedy, prideful, obnoxious, fearful kingdom. Let me see. All right, so an example of something today, someone loses their job, gets betrayed, or faces depression. Instead of collapsing completely, crashing out, like you see everybody doing, coming on social media or just acting out. It says they pray, think clearly, seek wisdom, and keep integrity. Because what? The scriptures talks about the Lord, wisdom maketh a man face to shine. But that's only, if you learn or know. Basically, you have that spiritual armor, Salaki. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. So it says, Paul says the real battle is deeper than people themselves. Today, that could look like, let's see, hatred spreading online, division between races, classes, families, men and women. And you see that very rampant, like the scripture said, the love of many shall wax cold. And ultimately how the Lord talks about he's going to set the Egyptians against the Egyptians. So you have Edomite on Edomite crime, white on white, aka white on white crime. You have a lot of things going on even amongst the tribes, meaning, you so-called blacks, Latinos, Hispanics, Native Americans. So it says, and one thing for certain, the powers that be, these Edomites, this system, this is what they push. So, the lower level Edomite, cracker, devil, they're all devils. He's that so-called white supremacy, and basically that their only fate, Basalaki, their only upliftment of the lower level Edomite, dirty trailer trash cracker. His only way he has been able to hold his head high is due to the fact that you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Hispanics, Native Americans are economically below him. Now, since the Edomite, like the scripture says, I believe in Deuteronomy 30:7, talks about how the Lord is going to send the curses upon our enemies. Now, the fact that Esau is struggling and he's getting duped by the 1% of the Edomites, Amalek. Now he's angry. All right. So there's a great division going on here in America: classes, families, men and women. So it says addiction, destroying lives. Those vices that Esau has put out there. So it says pornography, greed, manipulation, vanity, and corruption becoming normalized. And see, since the system was built off rape, rob, and murder, and all sorts of evil, wicked matter of deeds, this is why today we're seeing what we're seeing today play out in front of our faces, due to the fact that now you got people that's talking about we're voting for the lesser evil. The fuck out of here. Niggas talking about Kamala Harris should have been in the chair. What the fuck she would have done? And this is Jake talking about this. Men. Nigga told me today I don't care if a monkey got in the so-called White House. If I would have seen him pick up a microphone, I would have voted for him instead of Trump. Yeah, Jake do, man. You know. And you know, in all actuality, when you really ask Jake to break it down, they can't tell you. So the idea is that people can become influenced by destructive spiritual or moral forces without realizing it. And this is what has become, because the scripture talks about the Lord has mingled a perverse spirit amongst Babylon. And the 2/3 of our people, the Lord has actually gave them up to their affection, their vile affections. So Jake don't realize, what's playing out before his very face. So that does not mean every disagreement is demonic. It means evil often works through deception, temptation, pride, fear, envy, manipulation, and spiritual blindness. The armor of, let's see, it says the Most High power today. Let me see. The belt of truth. Truth holds everything together. Today, this means refusing lies, not living fake lives online, being honest with yourself, seeking truth even when uncomfortable. Alright, so boom. The modern battle, it says, a culture where misinformation, image building, and deception spread fast. Without truth, people become mentally unstable and easily manipulated. So, this is ultimately, the ones that are in the know of Yahweh Bashim Yahushua, you Israelites, we are indeed blessed, because he has given, through Yahweh Shah, he has given us the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and the spiritual armor to endure in these times, to pretty much stand firm and battle the corruptness and the evil of this society. Breastplate of righteousness. A breastplate protected the heart. Today this means living with integrity, avoiding corruption, and that's why the talk has been detaching from this society. That's been big amongst brothers. The topic that's been on a lot of brothers lately. Controlling destructive behavior, doing what is right even when nobody sees it. Give me one moment. Alright, hold on. So it says, controlling destructive behavior. Elder Yashawamba just made a video about, social media, etc. So doing what is right even when nobody sees it. Modern examples. refusing to betray people, resisting toxic behavior, staying loyal in relationships, rejecting lifestyles that destroy your conscience. That's very big. One thing was being pushed is more activity and women being a whore. Sin often damages people internally before externally. See that's why the scripture talks about, not committing sin. What is sin? The breaking of the law, statutes, and commandments. Because ultimately, when sin ultimately is mentally, it works on your conscience, your psyche, but then eventually it consumes you, and you become that person, that demon. If you are a man or a woman that just loves pleasure, or you just love you're an adulterer. You're a man, you love popping men's woman, or you're a woman that you just love messing around on your man. At first you know what you're doing, and then you get away with it. Nothing happens. Then you get amongst yourselves. You keep going, and then eventually something happens. And it's one of those transgressions and sins that is punishable of death. So a lot of times, this is why women often get deleted by men. And then those men that mess around with other men's women, when they find out, they usually delete the dude. Sometimes the woman as well. But, these are certain examples. This is, it says, rejecting lifestyle that destroy your conscience. And that's, one big thing is, always, as a woman, always, have a second man, and as a man, what's being taught is you not to be a man, is allow wickedness in your women and your children, and basically have no control of what's around you. So it says, shoes of the gospel of peace. Shoes help soldiers stand firm and move correctly. Today this means bringing peace instead of chaos, not feeding constant drama, staying spiritually grounded, carrying hope into stressful situations. Modern example, being the calm person in a family, workplace, or relationship full of confusion and conflict. And majority of times where you go amongst your family, it's chaos. Your workplace, chaos. Majority of people relationships is full of confusion and conflict. So it said the shield of faith, a shield block incoming attacks. Today, fiery darts could look like fear, anxiety, hopelessness, temptation, suicidal thoughts, constant negativity, attacks on your worth and purpose. And Esau, due to the covetous lifestyle, lasciviousness, lust, greed, Esau has made the people really believe if you don't have the abundance, riches, material, you're a nobody. So everybody's really concerned about getting material instead of inwardly your character, building up your character. Faith acts like a shield because it keeps those attacks from completely consuming your mind. Again, Sirach, the 5th chapter. Helmet of salvation. The helmet protects the mind. Today this means, or the helmet protects the head, but here the helmet protects the mind. Today this means guarding your thoughts, remembering your identity, not letting shame destroy you, not allowing the world to define your value. You ain't a real nigga, you're not a real nigga if you ain't did this or did that, or You know, if you ain't wearing this, or if you ain't doing this, or you ain't following this, you know, if you ain't been to jail, prison, sold dope, if you ain't no real nigga, you ain't black. You know, yeah, you gotta remember, no, we're not black. You know, and this is what Esau has coined to you so-called black people. For you to be a real black nigga, you know, you have to smoke weed every fucking day. You can't go to sleep without weed or doing drugs, and when you wake up, you can't function unless you put it back in your body. You know, when you look at these men today, they're fucking done. You know, the so-called black man, the so-called Hispanic man, Latino man, they're done. You know, they're trying to sound, a lot of them try to use big words and talk all astronomical, extravagant, all philosophical, and use these big ass words, but it's just, you know, inwardly you can just tell, nigga, you're a clown. That's not you. So it says modern warfare is often psychological. So it says doom scrolling, comparison culture, constant outrage, mental exhaustion, identity confusion. The helmet is protection against losing yourself mentally and spiritually. Yeah, this is beautiful, man. So the sword of the Spirit, the word of the Most High Power, Yahweh. This is the only offensive weapon mentioned. Today this means knowing Scripture deeply. The Scripture says, study to show thyself approved. Using wisdom instead of emotional reactions. Recognizing deception. Speaking truth when lies dominate. So here it is. Oh man, it's heavy. Just quoting verses is not enough. You can't be a parrot, like the elders say. It is understanding and applying them correctly. So, for example, when tempted toward revenge, hatred, lust, pride, or despair, Scripture becomes guidance and correction. So let's see. Praying always. Paul ends by saying to stay spiritually alert. Today this could mean constant awareness. Because you got to know that the times are evil. 2nd Edges, the 9th chapter, self-examination. Prayer during stress, asking for wisdom before reacting. Staying disciplined instead of spiritually asleep. A lot of modern distractions can numb people spiritually. Endless entertainment. Going back to the Roman Empire, addictions, constant noise, obsession with status, living only for pleasure. And that has numbed the majority of the people here in Babylon the Great. Prayer keep a person connected and aware. So what Ephesians 6 might look like in modern life, and this is the summary. It says a modern battlefield may not be swords and shields. It may be the phone in your hand, temptations online, mental battles, corrupt influences, destructive relationships. You know, you got to understand, honestly, and I'm going to say it short and sweet. For you men out there, if the woman, how am I going to say this? If you can't look or get nothing out of this girl except for some boxing and a blowjob, you really need to sit down and think, you know, and see what we're doing here. Because at some point you need more than a sloppy toppy, a blowjob, and some box out of a woman. Now, when you women, you gotta understand, you know, if you're single, you gotta control that hoe inside of you. You gotta chill. You gotta chill and relax. You know, in Lord's will, you know, what is it? Yahweh shall send you a man of the Lord. And if you got a man, hey, pray that, the spirit of Yahweh Shem Shah comes upon him. Or, or else, have may the Lord direct you. But we'll see how that happens. But, yeah, spiritual confusion, loss of purpose, pressure to compromise your values. The armor of God today is truth in a deceptive culture, discipline in a distracted culture, peace in a chaotic culture, faith in a fearful culture, righteousness in a corrupt culture. And one thing that one of the dudes try to tell, some of the dudes try to say to me was like, oh, that's why when something happened to you, da-da-da. I said, oh, okay, I get it, I hear you, If it happened to me, it'll happen to you too. Idiot. So it says, spiritual awareness in a spiritually numb culture. So this is the benefits and the blessings of having the spiritual armor amongst a chaotic, demonic, confused world. And those where he was edified, that was Shalom.